The law of dependent arising. The secret to bondage and release. Sermon 13. By Bhikkhu Ñāṇananda. Narrated by Bhikkhu Candana. Sermon 13. Pahankanuwa Sermon number 195. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage be to the Fortunate One, the Worthy, fully enlightened. Yang kinchi dukkhang sambhoti sabbang sankhara paccaya sankharanang nirodhena nathi dukkhassa sambhavo etamadi navang nyatva dukkhang sankhara paccaya sabba sankhara samatha sanyaya uparodhana evan dukkhakhayo hoti etang nyatva yatha tathang sammaddassa vedaguno sammadanyaya pandita abhibhuya marasangyogam nagachanti punabhavang. Dvayatanupassana Sutta, from the Sutta Nibbāna. Whatever suffering arises, it is all dependent on preparations. When preparations cease, the arising of suffering ceases. Knowing the evils of suffering dependent on preparations, with the stilling of all preparations, unobstructed by perceptions, that is the way suffering ceases. Thus, knowing this as it is, the wise, endowed with correct vision and well versed in knowledge, realizing this as it is, overpowering the bonds of Mara, do not go into another birth. Dear listeners, Sabba Sankhara Samatha, or the stilling of the preparations, stands foremost in the phrase that declares the peaceful, excellent nature of Nibbāna. It is the sankharas, or preparations, that take the first plunge into the endless misery of samsara, into darkness of ignorance. Therefore, it is clear that an intensive and an extensive clarification of the cluster of interpretations of the law of dependent arising is essential. To venture into that subject, we have chosen 3 verses in the Dvayatanupassana Sutta of the Sutta Nibbāna as the title for the 13th discourse on Paṭicca Samuppāda. Since this Dvayatanupassana Sutta was the topic of 3 earlier discourses, I am sure you remember the technique, the pattern the Buddha followed. The specialty about this sutta is that the Buddha has followed a technique of duality, a dual contemplation, in clarifying the Dhamma. This is how the Buddha presents the problem about the sankharas, or preparations, to the monks. Monks, if a question arises as to whether there is another method of practicing dual contemplation, do affirm that there is. Let me explain how it can be done. Yang kinchi dukkhang sambhoti sabbang sankhara paccaya ayang ekanupassana. One method of contemplating is that whatever suffering arises, it is entirely dependent on sankhara. Sankharanang cheva asesa viraga nirodha nathi dukkhassa sambhavo. With the total detachment and cessation of preparations, suffering ceases. That is the second method of contemplation. These 2 methods have been explicitly clarified by the Buddha in the 3 verses I recited earlier. Yang kinchi dukkhang sambhoti sabbang sankhara paccaya sankharanang nirodhena nathi dukkhassa sambhavo. Whatever suffering arises, it is all dependent on preparations. When the preparations cease, the arising of suffering ceases. etamādīnavang ñatva dukkhang sankhara paccaya. Knowing the evils of suffering dependent on preparations. Sabba sankhara samatha sanyaya uparodhana. Evang dukkhakkhayo hoti. Evang ñatva yatha tatang. With the stilling of all preparations, unobstructed by perceptions, that is the way suffering ceases. Thus, knowing this as it is, sammadasa vedaguno sammadanyaya pandita, the wise, endowed with correct vision and well-versed in knowledge, realizing this as it is, abhibhuya marasanyogang nagachanti punabhavang, overpowering the bonds of Mara, do not go into another birth. That is the meaning of the verses. Coming back to our subject, sankhara, we see it occurs as the second factor in the Paṭicca Samuppāda, following avidya. You know, we have many a time repeated avidya paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya viññāṇaṃ, viññāna paccaya nāmarūpaṃ, nāmarūpa paccaya salayatanam, and so on. The Buddha has himself given a clarification of the term sankhara in the Vibhanga Sutta, in the Nidāna Sangyutta of the Sangyutta Nikaya. Katame ca bhikkhave sankhara, tayo me bhikkhave sankhara, kaya sankharo, vaci sankharo, citta sankharo. Monks, what are the preparations? There are three: preparations of the body, speech, and mind. Remember, they are in the singular. There is yet another clear analysis of these terms in the Chula Vedalla Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. We meet Arahant Theri Dhammadānaṃ making a comprehensive analysis of them in reply to lay disciple Visakha's questions. He wished to know what exactly is meant by kaya sankhara, vaci sankhara, citta sankhara. Arahant Theri Dhammadānaṃ explained, Assasa passasa ko avuso visakha kaya sankharo, vitakka vichara vaci sankharo, sanyacha vedanacha citta sankharo. Let me give the meaning. Friend Visakha, inhalation and exhalation are the preparation of the body. Reasoning and deliberation are the preparation of speech. Perception and feeling are the perception of the mind. Again, the layman Visakha questions, Noble lady, how do inhalation and exhalation be the preparation for the body? How do reasoning and deliberation be the preparation for speech? How do perception and feeling be the preparation for the mind? Then the Arahant Theri had to explain further. Assasa passasa ko avuso visakha kayika ete dhamma kaya patipaddha. Tasma assasa passasa kaya sankharo. Friend Visakha, inhalation and exhalation are physical and bound to be associated with the body. They are therefore the preparation of the body. Then she continues, Pubbhe ko avuso visakha, vitakketva, vicharetva, paccā vācang bhindati. Tasma vitakka vichara vaci sankharo. Here she explains something special. Friend Visakha, first, one reasons out and deliberates, then expresses in speech. Therefore, reasoning and deliberation are the preparation of speech. Then she continues, Sanyacha vedanacha avuso visakha cetasika, ete dhamma citta patipaddha, tasma sanyacha vedanacha citta sankharo. Perceptions and feelings are mental phenomena, They are associated with the mind. Therefore, they are the preparation of the mind. Now let us explore the implications behind these words. According to the accepted theory of Paṭicca Samuppāda, consciousness leading to another birth is fashioned by sankhara, or preparations. But this reveals something more fantastic. You know that your breathing does not take you to the Deva world or to the lower realms. Respiration is not considered as an action, Kamma. But inhalation and exhalation provide the rehearsal for the drama of becoming. You know that inhalation and exhalation establish the first contact with the atmosphere at birth. They represent the subtle act of grasping. Similarly, they make the last effort at death. Let me explain this with the help of a simile. Imagine an iceberg in the ocean. What you see is only 1/10 of it. 9/10 are hidden below the sea level. Similarly, the wholesome and unwholesome deeds we consider as greatly significant are merely the visible section. The 9/10 that lie below is inhalation and exhalation. Remember, I said just now that breathing does not drag you to hell. But if you take a deep breath and deal a mighty blow on someone with a rod, you'll definitely end up in hell. What I want you to understand is that our breath is similar to the invisible portion or the rehearsal of the drama of becoming. Next, vitakka vichara, reasoning and deliberation, in speech are similar. It was specifically mentioned that before a word is uttered, vitakka and vichara are activated. We see that the word rehearsal is ideally applicable to this process as well. The mind dwells on the word by way of reasoning and deliberation before it is uttered. Similar to decorating the stage before the drama begins. Lying beneath the words are the invisible preparation called vitakka vichara, reasoning and deliberation. Now look at sanya and vedana, perception and feeling, as the process of preparation for thought. Thought, according to the Buddha, is more fascinating than a painting. Chittanyeva chittatarang. But that thought is prepared by perception and feeling. Therefore, the thought is essentially a preparation, a planning, a rehearsal. What serves as the background for this rehearsal? It's avidya, ignorance. Avidya paccaya sankhara. It is familiar to you, but let's go back to Vibhanga Sutta for further explanation. How does the Buddha interpret avidya? Dukkhe aññānaṃ, dukkha samudaye aññānaṃ, dukkha nirodhe aññānaṃ, dukkha nirodha gaminiya patipadaya aññānaṃ. In brief, it is ignorance of the Four Noble Truths. Aññānaṃ means ignorance. That is the background. The rehearsal is done in this dark background by inhalation and exhalation, reasoning and deliberation, perception and feeling. Now, for what purpose is this rehearsal? Let us find out. Sankharas, or preparations, are followed by vijnana, or consciousness. Vijnana is followed by nama-rupa, or name and form. We have already discussed vijnana and nama-rupa at length. Certain books, when discussing Paṭicca Samuppāda, talk of a patisandhi vijnana, consciousness leading to a birth. But the Buddha has defined vijnana as sixfold. Katamangcha bhikkhave vijnanaṃ, Chakhu Viññānaṃ, Sota Viññānaṃ, Ghana Viññānaṃ, Jivha Viññānaṃ, Kaya Viññānaṃ, Mano Viññānaṃ. Consciousness was explained this way, as sixfold. We have on an earlier occasion given the analysis of Namarupa in Venerable Sariputta's words. In the Buddha's words, this is how it is defined. Katamang cha bhikkhave namarupam sanya vedana chetana passo manasikaro idang vucchati bhikkhave namang chattaro cha mahabhuta chatunnang cha mahabhutanang upadaya rupang idang vucchati bhikkhave rupang. What, monks, is name and form? Perception, feeling, intention, contact, and attention. This is called name. The four primaries and the form that arises with a grip on the primaries, this, monks, is called form. That is the explanation, the words of the Buddha. As we earlier remarked, contact, or phassa, cannot be brought forward. We have compared the fivefold factors of nama to the 5 fingers, although later interpretations varied. Chattaro cha mahabhuta chatunnang cha mahabhutanang upadaya rupang. This means the perception of rupa arises in accordance with the 4 elements. That is, with a grip on the 4 elements. On either side of rupa are vijnana and namarupa. The vortex or whirlpool that we have often referred to is also found between these 2. The drama of becoming is also manifested between them. This can be well explained as anyamanya paccayata, mutual interdependence. The bodily preparation, kaya sankhara, the verbal preparation, vaci sankhara, and the mental preparation, citta sankhara, are shown as only the rehearsals for this interdependence. The final outcome of the interdependent drama between vijnana and namarupa is the preparation of the 5 aggregates of grasping, pancha upadana khanda. We have drawn many a comparison, such as the game of checkers, the game of cricket, etc., to illustrate the dual nature of vijnana. Becoming, or bhava, is dependent on the performance between these 2 teams, and an apparent continuity is thereby prepared. The final outcome of this process is the accumulation of the 5-fold aggregates of grasping. Following the identification of consciousness as 2-fold, the 6 sense spheres begin to function as a duality. And within the 6 sense spheres are produced the preparations that weave the web of becoming. It is very significant that cetana, intention, is included among the 5-fold nama dhamma, constituents of name. The meditative yogins prior to the Buddha had already realized that respiration was suffering, that reasoning and deliberation, vitakka vichara, were suffering, that perception and feeling were suffering. Although they had no clear idea of sankharas or the background of ignorance, through the attainment of jhanas, they became aware of the coarseness of preparations. As a result, they were playing a game of seesaw, as I have already mentioned. According to the Buddha, there are 6 kinds of pacifications. You will understand them as I explain. What are the 6? Speech is pacified in him who enters the first jhana. Reasoning and deliberation is pacified in him who enters the second jhana. Joy is pacified in him who enters the third jhana. Respiration is pacified in him who enters the fourth jhana. Perception and feeling are pacified in him who enters the attainment of cessation of perceptions and feelings. Finally, it is said that lust, anger, and delusion are pacified in the monk whose influxes are extinct. These 6 steps of pacification, passaddhi, are mentioned in the Samyutta Nikaya. The contemporary meditators of the time had attained the pacification of speech, reasoning, and deliberation, as well as inhalation and exhalation through jhana practice, but were unable to move beyond that. Freeing themselves from perception or sanya was a problem, a challenge. We refer to it as a game of seesaw. Their highest attainment, neva sanya nisanya yatana, the realm of neither perception nor non-perception, is explained in the Pañchataya Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya as follows. Sanya rogo, sanya gando, sanya sallang, asanya sammoho etang santang etang panitang yadidang neva sanya nasanyang. They realized that sanya is a disease, a wound, a dart, but the absence of sanya is delusion. It was not possible to relinquish it. That's why they were playing a game of seesaw. They held on to neva sanya nasanya, an excellent peaceful position, santang panitang, which is neither perception nor non-perception. What is found beyond neva sanya na sanya, I have discussed it, if you remember, drawing facts from Poṭṭhapada Sutta of the Digha Nikaya, which holds an amazing store of facts. It records how some ascetics and Brahmins asked the Buddha for an explanation of abhisanya nirodha. The Buddha said it is the stage where even cetana is given up. Why was there a confusion regarding abhisanya nirodha? I wonder whether you remember I explained it earlier. Nati kinchi conveys the idea that there is nothing. Nothing exists. These ascetics, with their yearning for becoming, saw nati kinchi as referring to some thing. They made a samapatti out of it, which took them to Brahma worlds with an unlimited lifespan. They could not attain anything beyond this due to ignorance of preparations or sankharas. Let us see what the Buddha has to say regarding this mental state. Poṭṭhapada Sutta has a valuable statement as follows. A monk who attains akinchanya yatana thinks cetaya manasa me papiyo, acetaya manasa me seyo, yannu nahang na cheva cetayang na chabhi sankhareyamti. Using cetana, intention, at this stage is not correct. I shall refrain from cetana. Cetana is a gross mental state. With the determination to avoid sankharas, finally he attains sanya vedayita nirodha. Let me explain this with the simile of the 5 fingers, though it was not used by the Buddha. The last finger stands for feeling, vedana. The 4th finger represents perception, sanya. The stubborn middle finger is intention, cetana. With the pacifying of cetana, i.e., bringing the middle finger under control, one experiences nirodha or cessation, which is not a thing. Nibbāna is signless, animitta, undirected, apannihita, and void, sunyata. It is the farthest end of the 3 sunyata, impermanence, suffering, and non-self. When you arise from the attainment of cessation, nirodha samapatti, your attention is focused towards the signless state, animitta, the undirected state, apannihita, and the void state with no soul, no continuity, sunyata. This is the special message from the Buddha to the world, the significance of which was unknown to the meditators of the time. You could remember this mental state as vimukha. Since preparations, sankharas, is our main topic, let us discuss it further, depending on the time available. Sankhara, which we compared to the hidden part of the iceberg, is used here in the singular. In this background, called sankhara, there is a drama of becoming between consciousness, or vijnana, and name and form, nama-rupa. We have used similes such as the game of checkerboards and the game Narcissus, played with water. The ultimate outcome of this drama is the accumulation of the 5 aggregates of grasping. Now we come to a significant aspect of the 5 aggregates of grasping. There is reference to sankhara in the aggregates, but used in the plural as sankhara. This is the point that misleads us. It is also the most intricate point in our effort to understand Paṭicca Samuppāda. The end result of the activity of Paṭicca Samuppāda is the 5 aggregates of grasping. You know ignorance means the ignorance of the 4 Noble Truths. Due to that ignorance, preparations such as inhalation and exhalation are activated. It is followed by another step where, instigated by ignorance and the delusion of consciousness, a duality arises, vijnana and nama-rupa. This is followed by a drama. As the final outcome of the drama, a multitude of forms appear. A multitude of feelings appear. A multitude of perceptions appear. A multitude of preparations appear. A multitude of consciousness appear. It is important to understand them as prepared preparations, sankhata sankhara. It is in the plural. The Buddha has offered a clarification to the preparations, sankhara, found in the 5 aggregates of grasping. Katamecha bhikkhave sankhara, chaime bhikkhave cetana kaya, rupa sanchetana, saddha sanchetana, gandha sanchetana, rasa sanchetana, pottabha sanchetana, dhamma sanchetana. How does the Buddha explain sankhara in the context of pancha upadana khanda? Not the same interpretation as in vachi sankhara. Cetana kaya means a mass of intentions. Intentions are of 6 kinds. Rupa sanchetana is intention based on form. Saddha sanchetana is intention based on sound. You can understand the rest in relation to the 6 sense spaces. Preparations are generated through intention. They are called sankhata sankhara. They are intentionally prepared. We know that inhalation and exhalation, reasoning and deliberation, perception and feeling can be compared to stage settings. The end result of the drama of becoming performed on the stage is the 5 aggregates of grasping. The Mahasalayatanika Sutta sheds enough light to clarify this matter. To explain the coming together and the falling apart of the 5 aggregates of grasping, it uses the terms upachaya and apachaya. The Buddha takes the 6 ayatanas, sense bases, one by one. The eye, the form, the consciousness, resulting from those 2, the contact that arises and its resultant feeling. Unless this process is understood clearly as it is, it might lead to conflict, delusion, and result in the arising of the 5 aggregates of grasping. One may fall into the deception of believing this is my form, this is my feeling, this is my perception, these are my preparations, and this is my consciousness. The Kajjaniya Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya deals with this subject at depth very clearly. The Buddha begins the sutta as follows: Monks, among ascetics and Brahmins, whoever recalled their past births, they did so basing their recollection on the 5 aggregates of grasping, or at least one aggregate. What the Buddha means is that their insight into the past births is not clear enough. They see a mass of forms that belong to the past. They identify the forms as I. They conclude, in the past I was. In recalling the past, in bringing the past births back to memory, certain forms come to one's view and thinks, in the past I was. The same process takes place regarding Vedana, or feeling, and other aggregates. We can see here the Sankhata pattern. The Buddha then proceeds to give an amazing analysis of each word. Rupa, we said, is an aggregate of grasping. Upadana Khanda. Upadana means a mass or cluster in one's grip. As often we remind you, the ordinary worldling has the notion of compact. Within the view of self, Sakkaya Ditthi, this notion of substance is apparent. Let us break up the term Sakkaya Ditthi. Sat means there is. Kaya is a bundle, collection. With this notion of there is a bundle, one attempts to establish one's identity as I am. What is Rupa? It is only a collection. It is the same with the other aggregates. Next, let us discuss the similes associated with the khandas. Form, Rupa, is like a cluster of foam. Feelings, Vedana, are like bubbles. Perception, Sanya, is similar to a mirage. Preparations are compared to the banana trunk. Consciousness is like an illusion. Why are these called Sankhata Sankhara? They are deceptive. These similes bring out their deceptive nature. At a distance, a cluster of white foam appears like a stone. It reveals itself only if you look at it scrutinizingly at very close quarters. Rupa is similar to foam, but an ordinary man of the world will not be able to see through Rupa or form. Similarly, feeling is comparable to a bubble of water floating in mid-air. When it bursts or breaks, one realizes it is nothing more than a bubble. Feeling is only a mirage. You realize a mirage is an illusion only when you chase after it. You have to keep peeling to the center of the banana trunk to realize it has no hard core. Such is the nature of sankharas. Only with penetrative wisdom could one realize that vijnana is a magical illusion. These similes were given by the Buddha to enable the meditators to realize the intricate nature of the subject at depth. But the ordinary people are not prepared to accept it. The Buddha offers a very interesting etymological interpretation of the words Rupa, Vedana, etc. Kincha bhikkhave rupang vadetha. Monks, what is called Rupa? Rupatiti ko bhikkhave tasma rupanti vucchati. Monks, it is Rupa because it hurts, is oppressed. And then comes a further analysis. Kena rupati, sitena pi rupati, jighachaya pi rupati, pipasaya pi rupati, dansamakasa vatata pa siringsapa samhasena pi rupati. This rupa or body, By what is it oppressed? By cold, heat, hunger, thirst, flies. By rupati, the Buddha meant that rupa is a boil. One's attention is drawn towards the body when one is oppressed by cold, heat, hunger, etc. This interpretation of rupati as oppressed by has a very deep meaning. Next, Vedana is explained as Vediyati. It means one feels, one experiences. That's not a complicating word. What does one feel? One feels happiness, unhappiness, and neither happiness nor unhappiness. Sanya means sanjanati, perceives, identifies. What is perceived or identified? In terms of colors, blue, red, yellow, white. That is how sanya is explained. Now comes the introduction to sankhara. It is extremely deep in meaning. The Buddha's technique of explaining sankhara is different. Kincha bhikkave sankhare vadetha sankatang abhisankaronti iti sankhara. Monks, what is meant by sankhara? A special preparation of the prepared. Abhisankaronti here means making a special preparation. Sankhara also has the idea of preparing. Abhisankhara means special preparing. Here we must remember that the Buddha explains sankhara in his discussion of Pancha Upadana Khanda as sankatang abhisankaronti iti sankhara. That is, a special preparation of the prepared. The Buddha called the body an abscess. When afflicted by cold, heat, hunger, discomfort, our attention is drawn towards it. Then comes another intricate question about sankhara. Kincha sankatang abhisankaronti. What preparation is specially prepared? Rupang rupattaya sankatang abhisankaronti iti. Form is prepared into form by a process of specially prepared preparation. In a similar manner, Vedana, feeling, is prepared into feeling by a process of specially prepared preparation. Vedanang vedanattaya sankatang abhisankaronti. The third one, sanya, has to be understood in a similar manner. The most wonderful interpretation is given to sankhara. Sankhare sankharattaya sankatang abhisankaronti iti sankhara. Sankhara, or preparations, are so called because preparations are prepared into prepared form by a process of special preparation. Then comes consciousness. Vijñānaṃ vijñānattaya sankatang abhisankaronti. Consciousness is formed into consciousness by a process of specially prepared preparation. This explanation of the Buddha is enough proof of the importance of sankhara. All the sankharas that come under these four categories are transformed into prepared form, specially prepared form. In that case, all the people live within the prepared state. Sankata means prepared, but the ordinary people do not understand it due to the perception of the compact or ghana sanya. The purpose of giving those similes, such as a mass of foam, a mirage, etc., was to clarify the perception of the compact. We came across some important words such as cetana, sancetana, sankhara, abhisankhara, sankata, and its opposite asankata. Let's study them. Cetana. Going beyond its etymology, it means adding up, adding together. Think of feeling, vedana, arising in you when a sense organ meets the sense object. It is followed by perception. With perception there is a tendency to add up everything. That is cetana, intention. We said that cetana is stubborn. Then comes sancetana. Sancetana arises as rupa sancetana, saddha sancetana, gandha sancetana, and so on. In rupa sancetana, form is treated as a thing, and a process of adding up takes place. In saddha sancetana, sound is treated as a thing, and cetana, or adding up, takes place accordingly. Understand the others in the same way. That's why the Buddha explained the term sankhara as sancetana in relation to pancha upadana khanda. Cha ime bhikkhave cetana. There are 6 intentions, kaya cetana, bodily intentions, such as rupa sancetana, saddha sancetana, and so on. Now we have given a brief account of sancetana. We have already discussed sankhara or preparation. Those who are interested in Indian literature and history know how stage makeup is done before a drama. To those who watch the modern teledramas, makeup is nothing new. Such is the change brought about by makeup, that even the actor cannot be identified. That deception is indicated by the term sankhara. So we see that drama actors make full use of the sankhara technique. The kitchen is another place where sankhara, or preparation, is done before food is brought to the table. That preparation is called sankhatyo. The term susankhata is used for a well-prepared meal. Once placed on the table, it is totally unidentifiable. There lies the deception. The term sankhara has this quality of deception within it. Sankhata is the word used to indicate things prepared for deception. They are totally misleading. Then the term abhisankhata means specially prepared. Beneath this superficial meaning, abhisankhata has a deeper meaning. Let us try to explore it. These different interpretations are all expressed in the suttas. Pabbajjabhisankharo indicates the urgency one feels for ordination, one's impatient urge for ordination. Gamikabhisankharo refers to one's anxiety to undertake a journey. The keenness to start on it is so strong that one's wish is somehow fulfilled. In the Pacetana Ratakara Vagga of the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha uses an ideal simile in a discourse. This etymological analysis is based on that simile. The carpenter of King Pacetana built 2 wheels. He let one roll forward. When a wheel is made to roll forward, it is given some momentum. This is how it is described. Yavatika abhisankharas gati tavatikang gantva chingagula itva bhumiyang papati. As long as the infused force lasted, the wheel rolled forward, twirled, and collapsed on the ground. Here we are interested in the term abhisankhara. It conveys the idea of momentum, urgency, impatience. That is exactly why the term abhisankhara is used in discussing Kamma. Kaya sankharang abhisankharoti, vachi sankharang abhisankharoti, mano sankharang abhisankharoti. It is here that the serious problem of the resultant aspect of actions come in. Kamma vipaka. Cetana, or intention, plays a major role here. We have mentioned that mere breathing does not pave the way to hell. With reference to wholesome and unwholesome actions, the three terms used are punyabhisankhara, apunyabhisankhara, and aninjabhisankhara. Punyabhisankhara consists of the preparatory force to prepare another birth in the Deva worlds and the human world, a pleasant birth. Apunyabhisankhara, on the other hand, prepares the environment for birth in hell. The third one, aninjabhisankhara, is more complex in meaning. Aninja means steadfast, unshakable. It is closely associated with the jhanas. It is interesting to note that unshakability is also a moving force. I shall explain it with a simile. You know how to spin a top. You wind the thread round it, jerk it, and let go. The force enables it to spin round, remaining in an erect position. The top stands erect but keeps spinning round. It is similar to being born in formless spheres, arupa loka, and continuing to live for eons and eons. They experience the results of the jhanas they have attained, like the never-ending twirl of a top. You can now understand how terrifying the sankharas are. Although one never committed unwholesome actions, one has to take birth in a Brahma sphere and keep spinning endlessly. That is aninjabhisankhara. Consider these important facts. They indicate the fearfulness of preparations. The Buddha has always emphasized the fearful nature and the sorrowful nature of these preparations. Jigacha paramaroga, sankhara parama dukkha, etang nyatva yatabhutang, Nibbānaṃ paramang sukhang. This too has come under discussion in an earlier discourse. Jigacha paramaroga. Hunger is the most severe of illnesses. Modern medical men will not agree with this statement. Today, what are called diseases are those severe deadly diseases now known. But even if all those diseases are cured, what will endure is hunger. It has been called the disease that makes you groan. Hunger makes you groan automatically, although you are healthy. That's why hunger is the most serious of diseases. Jigacha paramaroga. Sankhara parama dukkha. That statement too has a deep meaning. We grieve over the superficially manifested physical ailments. The story of this spinning top suggests how deep-rooted the problem is. Sankhara parama dukkha means suffering originated by preparations continue, even after all the other sufferings are allayed. That is the farthermost of sufferings. The top spins by the force of preparations. Sankharas activate the continued becoming. Sankhara parama dukkha etang nyatva yatabhutang. If one realizes this as it is, Nibbānaṃ paramang sukhang. Nibbāna is the highest bliss. At the very outset, we pointed out that the very first words expressing the peaceful, excellent nature of Nibbāna were stilling of all preparations. Sabba sankhara samatho. Can you imagine how deep it is? In order to free oneself from continued existence, wholesome and unwholesome preparations and specific preparations have to be stilled. Inhalation and exhalation have to be stilled. Reasoning and deliberation have to be stilled. Perception and feeling have to be stilled. The ordinary people, infatuated by desire for becoming, cannot comprehend this message. This subject is discussed in detail in the Sanchetana Sutta of the Chatukka Nipāta of the Anguttara Nikāya. It simply takes us by surprise. Kāye vā bhikkhave sati, kāya sanchetana hetu, uppajjati ajhattam sukha dukkham, vācāya vā bhikkhave sati, vaci sanchetana hetu, uppajjati ajhattam sukha dukkham, mane vā bhikkhave sati, mano sanchetana hetu, uppajjati ajhattam sukha dukkham avijjāpaccayāvā. Let us try to simplify this to our level. Kāye vā sati means there being a body, due to specific preparations of the body, there arise happiness, pleasant feelings, and suffering within. There being speech, due to intentions based on speech, words, language, vocal usage, there arise happiness and suffering within. If we consider mind to be something existing, there being mind, due to intentions based on mind, happiness and suffering arise within. One prepares these preparations for oneself, and others too prepare them and pass them to you. One experiences the happiness and suffering intentionally or unintentionally. Then the Buddha explains the more interesting and more important part of the story, avijjāpaccayāvā. It is due to ignorance that we take the body to be real, speech to be real, and mind to be real. Then the Buddha explains it in the reverse order. Avijjāyatveva asesa viraga nirodhaso kāyo nahoti yang paccayasa tang uppajjati ajhattam sukhadukkam sāvāca nahoti yang paccayasa tang uppajjati ajhattam sukhadukkam so mano nahoti yang paccayasa tang uppajjati ajhattam sukhadukkam. This is a fantastic statement, a revelation. With the complete cessation of ignorance, the body ceases to be. Speech ceases to be, and mind ceases to be. Whatever happiness and suffering arose dependent on those three, they cease. The sutta ends this way. Khettang tang nahoti, vatung tang nahoti, ayatanang tang nahoti, adhikaranang tang nahoti, yam paccayasa tang uppajjati ajhattam dukkha dukkham. Whatever field there was, whatever ground there was, whatever land there was, whatever reason there was, dependent on which suffering arose within, that is no more. That is how suffering is brought to an end. This explanation enlightens us on the deeper implication of sankhara. They play their part first as a rehearsal, and then assist in the drama of becoming, and finally act as the specific preparations for another birth. Such is sankhata. There are certain verses that confuse most people. Here is one. Sabbe sankhara anicchati, yada panyaya passati, atha nibbindati dukkhe, esamaggo visuddhiya. Considering all preparations as impermanent, if one realizes it with wisdom, one would be disillusioned about suffering. That is the path towards purity. The second verse begins with Sabbe sankhara dukkhati yada panyaya passati. If one realizes through insight that all preparations are suffering, that is the path to purification. The third verse poses a problem to everybody with sabbe dhamma anattati yada panyaya passati. The problem is the use of the term dhamma instead of sankhara. The first verse says, all preparations are impermanent. The second verse says, all preparations bring suffering. The third verse says, all dhammas are essenceless. That is the problem. We have explained dhamma as mind objects or things. According to our ancient teachers, Nibbāna is not a thing, but it has been misinterpreted as a thing. The Mula Pariyaya Sutta, which deals with this subject, is beyond the understanding of many. Some tend to misinterpret sankhata, prepared, asankhata, non-prepared, and Nibbāna as asankhata dhamma or asankhata dhatu, a non-prepared thing, which has resulted in a lot of confusion. But what really is asankhata? It is the cessation of preparation. This point is further explained in the verse, Sankharānaṃ khayaṃ ñatva akatanyusi brahmana. If one can understand the elimination of preparations as described in the Dhammapada, then the state of asankhata, non-prepared, referred to as akata, becomes clear. To make it more lucid, take the pattern woven on this mat. If the pattern is taken as a solid object, the mind may get attached to it. If one takes a penetrative look at the straws elusively woven this way and that, the mind can detach itself from the pattern. Asankhata, non-preparation, is similar to that. The danger here lies in considering even asankhata as a thing. In the statement, sabbe dhamma anattati, Nibbāna is also included. When we think of Nibbāna as the goal we wish to reach, it takes the form of an object for the mind. I hope it is clear to everybody. It has to be taken as an object to the mind. But, in the end, if Nibbāna is treated as a thing, we will be misled like the ancient yogis. Nati kinchi, or there is nothing, is mistakenly understood as a reference to a thing. If Nibbāna is also treated as a thing, one can enter samsara again. This is a subtle point in the Buddha Dhamma. Asankhata must be correctly understood. The verse, Aneka jati sangsaraṃ, ends with Visankhara gatang chittang tanhanang kaya majjaga. Here the phrase Visankhara gatang chittang is very significant. The mind, once dominated by preparations, is now free of them. The mind is liberated. That is why it is said that the moment intentions, cetana, and specific preparations are abandoned, one experiences nirodha, cessation. There is yet another important phrase that describes Nibbāna from another perspective. Viññānaṃ ca anabhisaṅkhaca vimuttaṃ. The consciousness, viññāna, of an ordinary person is prepared, sankhata. But if the mind is liberated from the specific preparations of name and form, we have a special term to describe that mind, anidassana viññāna. It is the consciousness that does not display any name and form and is totally liberated. Anabhisaṅkhaca vimuttaṃ also refers to the same state of mind. Similarly, asankhata simply means to emancipate oneself from the ghana saññā, or the perception of the compact, and begin to see through the perception of a cluster. I would like to draw your attention to another point at this juncture. Earlier I pointed out to you that the word sankhara is used in the singular as kaya sankharo, vaci sankharo, and chitta sankharo, but with reference to kamma, it is used in the plural. For example, kaya sankhara, vaci sankhara, but mano sankhara instead of chitta sankhara. This may be slightly confusing. We have told you that the three preparations, inhalation and exhalation, reasoning and deliberation, and perception and feeling, make up the underneath layers. But they encroach the top layer when mana gets recognition. That is when the mind receives objects, Dhamma, for thought. The moment these objects or Dhamma are treated as things, cetana or intention arises. It is the objects that flow into the mind that activate the stubborn middle finger. Let us now arrange everything in its proper order. First, we used the three words kaya sankharo, vaci sankharo, and chitta sankharo with reference to the three types of preparation. If we move on to the topic of kamma, kamma that prepares the ground for another birth, the terms used are kaya sankhara in the plural, vaci sankhara, and instead of chitta sankhara, the third is mano sankhara. Why? When the sense objects grasped by the sense faculties reach the mind, they are transformed into things. Chanda mulaka avuso sabbe dhamma. All dhammas have desire, chanda, as their root. These are complicated points, although we try to summarize them. You know sankhara is a term with deep implications. Beneath sankhata, or the prepared, runs an undercurrent of tanha, craving. These are the words of the Buddha. Avijja sampassajena bhikkhave vedaitena puttassa assutavato putujjanassa tanha uppanna tatojoso sankharo. Craving, tanha, arises in ordinary worldly people who are afflicted by ignorance. Preparation, or sankhara, is born out of this craving. Think of respiration, for example. You may give up everything, but you cannot give up breathing. It's called the most elementary level of grasping. You know how hard a person grasps for breath at death. That shows that becoming is dependent on the three subtle preparations. The external factors come in later and continue to follow from birth to birth. The fundamental force that helps in preparation is tanha, craving. The preparation done in the darkness of ignorance is threefold: kaya sankharo, vaci sankharo, chitta sankharo. The third preparation, chitta sankharo, becomes a mano sankhara, a preparation of the mind, when it assumes a gross state, when it becomes a prepared. With the mere arising of feeling and perception, there is no accumulation of kamma. That is called mano sanchetana. You know the first two verses in the Dhammapada. As the last point in the talk, we have come to the first two verses of the Dhammapada. Mano pubbangama dhamma, mano setha manomaya, manasa che paduttena. The subject discussed here is the mind, mana. The mind takes the responsibility, being in the forefront of mental objects, dhamma. Wholesome or unwholesome intentions, cetana, are activated at this point. Kamma is thus accumulated. Try to understand all the points we discussed today. We talked about sankhara, abhisankhara, cetana, sanchetana, sankhata, and asankhata. The summary of the talk is contained in these words. You can now understand the significance of the Buddha's words. Yang kinchi dukkhang sambhoti sabbang sankhara paccaya. But it is not a very popular statement. It is very amusing to see that the most fascinating or interesting song in the Buddha's teaching is the last thing we hear on earth. Anicca-vata sankhara uppada vaya dhammino uppajjitva nirujjanti te sangvupasamo sukho. To tell you the truth, my first impulse was to begin this discourse with this verse. But I knew you would walk out on hearing it. That's why I brought it out last. Anicca-vata sankhara is one of the most profound verses. But it has faced the same fate as the Satipatthana Sutta. Both have been reduced to the level of a pumpkin among the funeral rites. But you can see that this verse carries a message at its very depth. Anicca-vata sankhara uppada vaya dhammino. Impermanent are all preparations. They are of the nature of arising and passing away. Uppajjitva nirujjanti. They arise and cease. Te sangvupasamo sukho. Their pacification is bliss. Now let's enrich this treasure of a verse with another Buddha word. Anicca-vata sankhara uppada vaya dhammino uppajjitva nirujjanti te sangvupasamo sukho. That is all the verse says. But let us expand on it. In the sankharas referred to in the above verse, from inhalation and exhalation to the more gross preparations called abhisankhara, the nature of arising and ceasing is evident. Uppada vaya dhammino. But there occurs a more revealing exposition of sankhata. Tinimani bhikkhave sankhatassa sankhata lakkhanani. Monks, 3 main characteristics are seen in preparations that have been prepared. What are they? Uppado panyayati, vayo panyayati. Thitassa anyathatang panyayati. An arising is visible, a cessation is visible. Furthermore, thitassa anyathatang, thiti means being continuing. While being, or while continuing, a change is visible. We saw that sankhara has only an arising and ceasing. But regarding sankhata, there is an arising, a passing away, and an otherwiseness of the apparently static. The Buddha explains thitassa anyathatang, a turning otherwise of the apparently static state. What is mistakenly seen as being, continuing, enduring, undergoes change. The essence of the problem lies hidden there. Now let us understand what is called asankhata dhatu. You have heard that asankhata refers to Nibbāna. This is how it is described. Tinimani bhikkhave asankhatassa asankhata lakkhanani. In the non-prepared state, 3 non-prepared characteristics are to be found. What are the 3? Arising is not found. Cessation is not found. A change of an apparent static state is not found. With the cessation of consciousness, with the cessation of name and form, with the cessation of 6 sense spheres, everything ceases. There is no possibility of arising and ceasing again. That is the point we tried to drive in through our sermons on Nibbāna. A sphere or ayatana is mentioned. Many did not understand the use of the term ayatana here. In this sphere there is no going, there is no coming, there is no being, there is no continuing, there is no anything. That is the explanation to asankhata. We have tried our best to put across as much as we could within 1 hour. Try to digest them well. Try to understand them from diverse perspectives. What do I mean? All these years you have been listening to the conventional interpretation of Paṭicca Samuppāda, where sankhara preparations are supposed to prepare a patisandhi vijnāna, a consciousness leading to another birth. Now you know it is not correct. It has 2 meanings within the terms sankhara, abhisankhara, sankhata. The purpose behind our explanation is not to argue or challenge, but merely to put the listeners into correct view. Meditation cannot proceed on misconceived views. Try and maintain the perfectly correct understanding in order to continue on this journey. You have observed the valuable precepts and spent the day in meditation as usual. You have developed awareness and mindfulness. You must also apply to your meditational practices the contents of this discourse, which will lead you to insight. Make the determination to attain the 4 stages on the path to emancipation before the light of the Dhamma goes out. Whatever beings there are, from the lowest to the highest state of existence, who wish to share in the merits of listening to this discourse, may they accomplish their aspirations and attain to the peace of Nibbāna. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.